Right. Okay, hello, book lovers. Welcome to our nonfiction editors picks. These titles have all been nominated by our publishers as exciting new voices, traditionally under-supported voices, just stories they want to amplify and let you know about. So this is Sarah Richmond from Edelweiss by Above the Tree Line. I'm just here facilitating today. I'm really excited to introduce you to these books and the editors and authors behind them. First, I just have to take a second to make a quick note that this session is part of ongoing work of Treeline 2020, which supports diversity, equity, inclusion in the publishing industry. So this underlines all the work that we do as a company, but Treeline 2020 in particular accomplishes this goal through investing in organizations doing really good work, providing access to internships and scholarships, and also amplifying under-supported voices. So thank you for listening and participating and making all that possible. So today's session is pretty special. We're going to hear about an amazing collection of books. And whether you work at a bookstore or a library, or you love to review books, you're a blogger, maybe you work at an agency or in the media, or you just love books, you're just a passionate reader, you're definitely going to leave with some books to add to your to-be-read list. Don't worry, you will get links to all of these books, the title listings in Edelweiss, so you can keep track of them and you can read more about them. Many of them also have review copies available if you want to check them out. If you're listening at Bookfest, you can also add these books to your tote bag and potentially even purchase from the independent bookstore of your choice. So, okay, we have representatives from all of these publishers today. Some of them are the authors themselves, and they're each going to take just a few minutes and share why they're so excited about their book. So without further ado, we'll just get started. Our first book today is Female Husbands, A Trans History, and the author Jen is on the line. She's going to talk to us about it.
Hi there. My name is Jen Mannion. I'm the author of Female Husbands, A Trans History, published by Cambridge. Female Husbands is a social and cultural history of female husbands and their queer wives in the US and the UK. What was a female husband, you might want to know? Well, that was a term that was used to describe someone who was assigned female at birth, who transgender, lived as a man, and married a woman. They assumed the legal, social, and economic position that was reserved for white men in small towns and big cities. They were frequently written about in the press, often presented as shocking and controversial figures, sometimes with the headline, extraordinary. They lived lives that, in contemporary terms, might be described as transgender, non binary, butch, lesbian, queer, and bisexual. Some people think that transgender identification is a modern phenomenon, but that could actually not be further from the truth. And when you study transgender in the long ago past, you find the wide range of ways that people challenge the gender norms of their times. If you read my book, you'll learn about how visible female husbands and their wives were in the 19th century and wonder why you've never heard about them before. The heart of the book is really hundreds of newspaper accounts that were written about them. When it came to reporting the news that someone assigned female at birth had decided to live as a man and marry a woman, certain questions were nearly always raised, such as why did they do it? How did they do it? And did their wives know? And so, aside from learning about the lives of these fascinating people, the book in many ways is a series of mini biographies, but it also tracks the changing approaches to these questions and the patterns of reaction by local communities over time. And so I'm going to share a little bit with you about one of my favorite accounts in the book. It occurred in 1829 upon the death of a female husband, James Allen, who was killed by a falling piece of timber while they were working for a shipwright in Dockhead, England. Allen was declared dead en route to the hospital, but the end of James's life was really the beginning of their wife Abigail's nightmare. She had just lost her husband of 21 years and the primary earner for the family. The coroner overseeing the inquest, Thomas Shelton, well, he struggled with the challenge that Allen presented because the medical students who dressed Allen's body declared that Allen was female, while Allen's coworkers, employers, and wife knew Alan to be a man. And so the state of Alan's legal sex remained in limbo, suspended between competing claims from medical students asserting female anatomy, and then a lifetime of relationships, paperwork, and legal documents stating that Alan was a man. And so Shelton held a copy of the marriage certificate in his hand and said, I called the deceased he because I consider it impossible for him to be a woman. He had a wife. And so, in this way, you can see that gendered pronouns actually play a key role in discussions about a person's sex, just as they do now. Finally, Female Husbands takes an unusual direction in that it uses the gender neutral pronoun they in reference to everyone who transgender throughout the book, one of the first nonfiction historical works to do so. One of the reasons for this is that we don't truly know what motivated each individual person. And so, in that respect, the subjects of this study confound our contemporary notions of gender identity. But that should not undermine the power that they offer us as a window into our collective past. In requiring us to learn about them as they were perceived by others, Female Husbands refuse a simple, self determined assertion of gender identity, which is something we're very used to right now in modern times. And so I wanted to allow for a trans reading of their lives without foreclosing on the idea that some of them may have identified with the category of woman. So most female husbands lived seemingly trans lives. They also demonstrate the tremendous overlap between categories of gender and sexuality, refusing a simple reductive reading with one or the other as a driving force. Thank you for listening.
Wow. Well, I can't help but notice, Jen, that the publication or the paperback publishes today. So congrats on that.
Thank you.
That's a big day. It sounds like a ton of research and work went into that. So that's a great piece of work to share. Thank you for doing that. All right. Our next book is Lady Romeo, and we have Juliana on the line, who is the editor, I think.
Hi, everybody. My name is Juliana Hobner. I'm an editor at Ideapress, which is a new imprint at Simon & Schuster. And I'm here to talk about Lady Romeo by Tana Wojcik. The paperback is on sale on June 8th of this year, right in time for Pride Month. And when I first acquired this book, it was really an amazing opportunity. As an editor and as a reader, I always love to think of a story as a stage, and you have a center spotlight of an event or a moment or a time period that everyone sort of knows about or enjoys to learn about. And I like to think about the people or the moments that are right on the fringe of those spotlights. So if it was shifted just a couple degrees to a different direction, there's a whole new moment that everyone can learn about. And when I first received the proposal for Tana's book about Charlotte Cushman, who was an iconic but forgotten 19th century actress, that's exactly what that was. Charlotte was somebody who has basically touched or known almost every major American figure in arts and politics in the 19th century. She was raised in Boston among the Transcendentalists. She was a member of Ralph Waldo Emerson's congregation. She grew up right down the street from Louisa May Alcott, and in fact is the inspiration for the actress character in Joe's Boys. She became an actress in Boston in local productions, went with a traveling group to New Orleans, and then ended up abroad in London, where she became famous for playing breeches roles in Shakespeare plays, meaning that she was playing the male characters. And then when she came back to New York, she was a star performing for Abraham Lincoln, actually alongside John Wilkes Booth and his brother Edwin. And the scar, I found out through Tana's book, that was on John Wilkes Booth's neck that was used to identify him as the killer of President Lincoln was actually given to him allegedly by Charlotte during a play fight that they had on stage. She scratched him by accident, and that left a scar that was then used to identify him when he was on the run. So she has literally and figuratively touched a number of people who really defined our culture and our country during this period of time. But what made her even more remarkable was that she was living as an openly queer woman during this time. She was married to 2 different women in her lifetime, the second of whom was a sculptor. She's the first woman to be given a Parks Commission in New York. And the Bethesda Fountain in Central Park, which is also very well known through its use in Angels in America, the woman that is on the top of that fountain is in fact Charlotte. Her wife modeled it after her, so she can be seen even today. But because of the fact that she was an openly queer woman, because of the fact that she was challenging gender norms within theater, she was mostly written out of the narrative when she died of cancer in her 40s. She lived in Italy at the time as well, so the American consciousness around her sort of faded. But Tana is a woman who is from a theater background, and she found out about Charlotte through her Shakespearean studies. For those who are really involved in the Shakespeare world, she's a name that pops up every now and then. But Tana realized as she dug more and more that there was really no reason that she shouldn't be as commonly known as other actors and actresses and defining figures of the time. She really invented the concept in the female zone of method acting when she played Nancy in Oliver Twist in New York. She actually went down to the 5 Points and lived as a prostitute for a few weeks and ended up actually trading money for an actual beggar woman prostitute's clothes that she then used on stage. So she's had such an amazing impact on the theater world. And when she retired, she actually shut down basically all of what is now the Flatiron District. That was where the theaters were in the 1870s. And when she said it would be her last performance, the entire area filled with spectators cheering for her. They actually had to take her carriage off of the horses and carry it manually back to the hotel because they were afraid the crowds would spook the horses. So if you're in the market for a story that is just a really amazing kaleidoscopic but quick read about a woman who we all should know, Lady Romeo is really the one for you. It's a great summer book. It's a great book if you're a theater fan, a women's history fan, an Americana fan, or a hidden history fan. And I hope you all love it.
Ooh, what a life she led.
Good.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks for sharing that one. That does sound like it would be a quick read, like a fun one to take to a beach somewhere. I'm looking forward to some summer weather, so it sounds pretty good to me. Great, thank you. And it publishes during Bookfest, so it'll be available. All right, thank you. Our next book is, let me click over. We have Dear White Women, and we have the authors Sarah and Misasha are on the line.
Thank you so much. We're excited to be here. I'm Sarah Blanchard, and together with Misasha Suzuki Graham, we are the authors of Dear White Women, Let's Get Uncomfortable Talking About Racism, which is published by the Collective Book Studio. And unlike many books on anti-racism, Dear White Women is one that focuses on the practical side of being more anti-racist. In each chapter, we break down a topic into 3 sections. We've got our listen sections, which highlight a personal story or someone's narrative. Second, we have our learn sections that provide the historical context for that situation. And third, our act sections offer practical steps on what you can do differently. So we cover not only ways to address the most common points of resistance we see in white people across the United States, but we also address the history, experiences, and stereotypes of Black people in the United States that we all really need to understand. Additionally, we also address other marginalized perspectives, including Asians, Native Americans, and Latinx histories and stereotypes, basically so we can level set the playing field of understanding just where our country has been, and then better navigate where we want the country to go.
So Sarah and I are both biracial. We're the daughters of a white parent and a Japanese immigrant parent. We are best friends who met 25 years ago in college. And over the years, once I married my Black husband and had our very, very mixed race children, we realized that through our changing conversations, the worries that we had for our children were very different. You know, one of my primary worries is that I worry that my kids or my husband will leave our house one day and not come back, based solely on the color of their skin. And as a mother, or as anyone who has children in their lives, this is a devastating fear, as our primary goal is often to keep our children safe. We know that we need everybody involved in these difficult conversations to make a better society for our collective children. Over 2 years ago, we started our award-winning weekly podcast by the same name as our book, Dear White Women. And one of the biggest questions we get asked is, why that name? By virtue of our own heritage, we've been able to move through white spaces and observe the sorts of conversations that are and are not happening in these circles. Not only do white women wield a lot of power in this country, between wallet control and voting power, but they also have many spheres of influence in everyday communities like schools, work, and our very own dinner tables. So while this book isn't solely for white people, we want to reach white people where they are, and in a heart-led way, give people not only the history they might not have learned in their schools growing up about the way different races have been treated historically in the United States, but follow that up with practical ways that each of us can move the needle so that we can build a better country for all of us. Thank you very much for listening.
I love the practical nature that you've woven in there, because that's often the biggest challenge is, what do I do? How can I make a difference? How can I improve? Thanks for sharing. All right, our last book is Beyond Diversity, and we have the author Rohit with us as well.
Hey everyone, thank you for bringing me in. And I wanted to talk about this book, which was inspired by actually something that we felt was missing in the world of diversity and inclusion conversations, which was bringing all of them together. There was so many amazing conversations about getting more women into technology, or fantastic conversations and important conversations about racial literacy, or conversations about creating more inclusive workplaces. But they were often happening in isolation of one another. And so we were inspired to create a summit, a virtual summit, which we actually held in January of 2021, with the ambition of just bringing together, maybe 30, 40 people to talk about these different topics. What ended up happening is this summit turned into a huge undertaking. There were more than 200 speakers, 50 sessions. We had range of topics from how food can promote diversity to casting directors from Hollywood. We had a master puppeteer talking about creating content for children to help them understand diversity. We had a Guinness Book World Record holder for the fattest person to complete a marathon was one of our speakers as well. And so we just brought all of these different worlds together, and we thought, well, the summit was amazing and the conversations were amazing, but we need to go beyond diversity. We need to actually make sure that this turns into action as opposed to just talking about change. And so my co-author and I, Jennifer Brown, teamed up from very different worlds. Jennifer is an amazing diversity and inclusion expert. She's been working in this space for more than 10 years. She's the author of a book called How to Be an Inclusive Leader that was hugely popular, released earlier this year. And I'm coming from the world of business marketing and trends. I'm a trend guy. I wrote a book called Non-Obvious Megatrends, which came out also earlier this year, was a #1 Wall Street Journal bestseller. And we put those worlds together to try and create an ultimate guide for people to multiple themes within the world of diversity. So the way the book's organized is there's 12 themes, thematic chapters. And each chapter lays out a particular topic, whether it's education, entrepreneurship, storytelling, future, technology. All of those are different chapters. And on each chapter, we talk about how the world is, what's changing, how it could be, and then specifically how you could take action. And so the book is really targeted at a bunch of different audiences. Number one, people who are working in roles where they'd like to see a more inclusive workplace, leaders who want to create a more inclusive workplace for themselves and for their companies. The second audience are a lot of people in education who are taking training courses around this, who want conversation starters and who want to look at this issue of diversity and inclusion like on a more broad and inclusive topic in a more inclusive way. And one of the things we heard over and over again from participants in the summit and from early readers of the book is that this is like the world's most ambitious conversation about diversity. And that was kind of what we settled on as the tagline, because we were bringing so many of these voices together. So ultimately, the nature of this book is that it's not necessarily just my perspective or Jennifer's perspective. We also have a number of other authors, a number of other contributors. We're bringing in expert perspectives from more than 100 different people who are working in this space. And so in the book itself, you will get that inclusive level of all of this expertise packaged together in a way that hopefully helps us to work together to create a more inclusive world. So thank you for giving me a chance to talk about it. The last thing I'll mention is, as you can see, the cover on the slide is not actually the cover. We have commissioned an amazing collage artist named Zaria Shin, who's working on the actual cover. So it's a little bit of a mystery because at the time of this recording, we don't have the cover, but by the time you watch this, the cover will be available. So go and check out Edelweiss and you can see the actual cover. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. New cover coming soon. The cover reveals are always fun. So that sounds like it was an amazing summit, and out of it has come an amazing book. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we have Becoming Abolitionists, and we have Alessandra Bastagli who's going to talk to us about that.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everybody. I'm Alessandra. I'm the editorial director of Astra, which is a new imprint that launched last fall. And you will find that as an imprint, we gravitate towards authors who experience their subject deeply and personally, and who have a strong point of view. And the book that I'm presenting today, which is our lead nonfiction title, reflects the kinds of books we'll be publishing at Astra. So I met Derica Purnell about 3 years ago and was completely blown away by her. And over time, my admiration only grew as I witnessed an amazing shift in the conversation about race and police violence in this country. Because whereas 3 years ago, there was at best talk about body cams and banning chokeholds and calls more vaguely for police reform, now we hear everyone from like members of Congress or op-ed writers in the New York Times or Teen Vogue advocating for defunding and even abolishing the police. Derica was at the forefront of this shift in conversation, and Becoming Abolitionist is not just the book for our times, it's a book only she could write. Becoming Abolitionist centers Derica's own journey on embracing police abolition. And it wasn't easy because she grew up in an environment where she had experienced housing insecurity and food insecurity and was sent to foster care, and a situation in a neighborhood where calling the cops was often the only option when there was a crisis. It was also hard for her because she had such faith in justice and the law that she worked her way through Harvard Law School. But as she studied law and policing and criminal justice reform and history, she started questioning her own assumptions, and also started noticing how all around her activists, organizers, people she admired were becoming abolitionists. So in chronicling her own intellectual journey, Derica addresses key questions that come up a lot in the media or in her community organizing, like what about the murderers? What about the rapists? And she explains that policing and incarceration cannot and will not prevent these harms from happening. They can't even properly respond to them or act as a deterrent. So here she's inviting us to imagine a system that isn't only called upon to respond to a crisis, but that is working every day to resolve the underlying injustices that causes the crisis in the first place. And she describes in the book a lot of groups that are already doing this, not just in the United States, but abroad as well. So there's a real need for this book, and this is the book she was meant to write. And because of my work with her, even recently with the Derek Chauvin verdict that came in on the same day that Ma'Khia Bryant was killed by the police, I finally felt, thanks to my work with her, that I had the language and the ideas to make sense of it. And more importantly, perhaps, I knew what to do with my rage. And it's not just me, because since we announced the book, we've received so many media requests for Derica, as well as requests from universities around the countries, Black churches, and prison reading groups as well. And Derica also did a panel at Winter Institute, which she loved because she loves her indies in Baltimore and St. Louis, where she lives. And so we plan to build a grassroots campaign around this book in partnership with indie bookstores and libraries and colleges, as we know that it's only with your help that we can reach the broad readership that this book deserves. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Alessandra. I was really happy to see this book here because I remember reading the article in The Atlantic when it came out. And
that's right. Yeah, that's what started it all. Yes.
Right. I think it was how I became a police abolitionist. And
That's
so,
right. Yeah.
yeah, so it'd be great to read the book as well.
Thank you.